Please welcome Laurette Lahey, Senior Director of Flight and Vehicle Technology for Boeing Research and Technology and Executive Steering Committee member.
Good morning, and welcome to Day 4 of the AIAA SciTech Forum. I'd like to take this opportunity to once again thank all the volunteers and committee chairs who helped plan and execute this forum. Without your hard work and dedication, our technical and programmatic sessions would not be possible. Student best paper competitions were held this week by several technical committees. Would all student paper winners please stand to be recognized? So for today's session, just a few remarks about the remarkable things that engineers do across our planet. Engineers continue to take on some of the hardest challenges posed to humankind in understanding and unlocking the mysteries of the universe and creating the systems for humans to live and work on Earth and in space. For millennia, engineers have built the structures and systems that have enabled humans to thrive on Earth, live in space, and explore the universe. 50 years ago, engineers created the systems to land crews on the moon and to return them safely. Today, we have visited all the planets in our solar system in some form or fashion and have crewed the International Space Station for over 20 years continuously. That's remarkable. It seems like just yesterday we were working to put the International Space Station together. We are now preparing for human missions to the moon to further our scientific knowledge, learn how to conduct a sustainable presence there, and prepare for the eventual exploration of our nearest planet, Mars. But we need not forget sustainability on planet Earth and how engineers play a key part on making our everyday lives successful. Today we will discuss how engineers have built the world we know today and that our present and future depends on them. I am pleased to introduce our keynote speaker, Lori Garver. Lori Garver is the CEO of Earthrise Alliance, a philanthropic initiative established to fully utilize earth science data to combat climate change. Ms. Garver is a former deputy administrator of NASA. She led the NASA transition team for President-elect Obama and was his lead space policy advisor on the campaign. Previous senior positions have included general manager of the Airline Pilots Association, associate administrator for policy and plans at NASA, and executive director for the National Space Society. Additionally, she is a co-founder of the Brooke Owens Fellowship, an educational organization providing internships and mentorships to collegiate women pursuing degrees in aerospace fields. Please welcome Lori to the stage.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for being here. It's a great crowd for being so early, and I really do want to express my appreciation for the invitation. Mike Zarek and the program team reached out to me telling me I'm going to be so excited because the topic of this conference is the why. It's what you like to talk about, finding global solutions that aerospace can address. And what Mike didn't know, while that is true, I would have come for any topic. I haven't been speaking at AIAA events for about 6 years since I left NASA. While I was at the Airline Pilots Association, they have their own associations, but it really, really gave me an even deeper appreciation for and support of our aviation world. So I thank AIAA for their decades of service to aerospace. So for this talk, I'm going to use aerospace generally to be both aviation and space, because this was the day I could come and the topic was engineers have built the world, I added the friendly modifier, and we can't survive without them, because I believe that is 100% true. I also need to thank AIAA for trusting that I will be up here and speak about things that perhaps are not what we usually address at aerospace conferences. When I didn't know Laurette before meeting her yesterday, so this morning going up, I said, in the Q&A, feel free to bring up the questions you might get from the audience that seem a little controversial or mean. I don't mind at all. I can be a little, I don't want to say combative, but I can be a lightning rod. And she never met her till yesterday. Oh, really? Like who doesn't know that? So I really am not planning to hijack this for purposes of past debates with AIAA over women in space or the things that are important to me beyond this topic, but feel free to ask me those in the Q&A. So, as Laurette said, I am at Earthrise. I am the CEO of this nonprofit that is funded by philanthropy in order to address climate change through the unbelievable assets we have in space. And so to start out, I do want to reinforce what it is that engineers and aerospace engineers, civil, mechanical, biological, have accomplished for us within the 60 years plus of our history. I think the primary aerospace contributions to date that I outline will resonate with many of you. But then we need to talk about what are the current challenges today, and are those the same things we've been addressing for 60 years? What about today's global challenges are we best suited to address? And what kind of things we could be doing if we want to, again, be seen, I think, as addressing global challenges. Why should we do it? Why now? So to start right off, unbelievable industry that we are in. For those of you early career, mid or late career like myself, we're very proud of these accomplishments. Look no further than the economic impact our industry has had. Annually, more than $300 billion. If you include commercial aviation, we were getting close to $1 trillion a year because we would count all of these tourist activities that couldn't happen if you didn't get there by airplane. But primarily, we overlook the impact of the instantaneous communications and the benefits of positioning through GPS that this community drove. We have literally opened the world to ourselves. We, in the 60s, were asked to go to the moon to beat the Soviet Union. It seems like other people might have contributions to date in aerospace, say, landed on the moon. We did, and that was a wonderful thing we did. That undermined the threat from communism. We were asked to go to the moon by the political leadership, by the public whose dollars we spent, because at the time, the global threat was that communists had the technology beyond us. After Sputnik, we were scared, and NASA came to the rescue. We did that. And within the time frame of the challenge that was laid out, which seemed impossible at the time. Our science missions over the 60 years have inspired the world. We talk about this as one of the primary benefits, and truly, having visited all the planets in some form, going beyond, having the telescopes, so excited for the Webb telescope that could, for the first time, see that distant blue planet orbiting a star. Those are things that feed our spirit, and we have given that to the world and are giving it to the world. The instantaneous communications, I will argue, in the 80s and the 90s are what helped democracies inspire citizens to rise up and get more agency for themselves. This isn't something we talk about a lot, but it wouldn't have happened without us. And of course, the military capability that the aerospace community has brought to bear maybe is more controversial, but I definitely put it on a contributions chart. It is something we should not take for granted. The global look from space at Earth is another thing that belongs on this chart, but since I'm going to spend the majority of my time talking about it, I will transition to the future. If you look online today, top 10 global challenges. The topic of this conference is for us to address them, but they didn't list what they were. So I looked. This is the list in order roughly of anything you'll see on the web for the top global challenges. So let's look at those things that we, of today's global challenges, have addressed, and then what it is about our capabilities that keeps us well suited to do that in the future. I ranked these: 1, if we help somewhat; 2, we've been pretty influential; and 3, we have had or could have a major impact. So I think on climate change, we've been important. This maybe should have been a 2. The future, however, undoubtedly is a 3. We are at a point where we have the ability in our industry to make an incredible positive impact on addressing the #1 global challenge of our time. Pollution. I'll give us a 1. I'll give us a 2 for the future. There's a lot of things that contribute to pollution, but look at, and I mean these in a positive way, we know, I think John mentioned fly shame on the first day, and there is going to be, for commercial airlines, something to address. But the aviation community is working to advance green fuels, and I think we have the ability to do more to assist with lowering pollution in the future. Violence, I'm not giving the aerospace community much there. So security and well-being, however, they get top marks across the board. I don't think there's any question. We've done this well. We will continue to do it well. And again, we shouldn't overlook that. Education. Give us a 1. I know we often talk about that's one of the reasons we do this, and I mentioned inspiration, and we do have a role. But we're not going to have the greatest impact on education, but I think we do have a role. Unemployment, I'm definitely throwing us a bone here and giving us a 1 as well. We talk about these jobs. I know Robert said the day before, oh, there's no bank on the moon, you know, we spend all that money here on jobs. But every government dollar is spent on jobs. So if we think that's the most important thing, what do you think about that dollar that goes to farm subsidies or welfare? Those are jobs. Those are things that if it's the government's money, you can't really say that you're doing more for unemployment. We have the ability to spin off industries and markets, and that's where I think we can, over time, help on unemployment. Government corruption didn't give us anything. If anything, we should be a better example of how not to do that. Hunger and malnutrition. We get a 1. I think we could do more. Didn't give us anything on substance abuse and terrorism. A 1 across. We have capabilities. Certainly engineers beyond us have assisted. The which programs of ours address those global challenges best? If you look at the military, those are major contributors to our security and well-being and violence. In my view, I'm not going to talk about this much, but that is something that may not be what we talk about most, but it's a larger area than the civil or commercial side. Jumping down to commercial, as I mentioned, communication satellites, remote sensing, GPS, these are things that have really advanced our well-being as well, in my view, in less of a direct way. But it's the civil programs that are really interesting in my view, because we have been helping through space science on addressing education and the innovation and inspiration. Aeronautics, I think we've been a huge contributor to the aeronautics field. the economics, and again, helping grow a safer, less polluting airplane. And human spaceflight, I don't know, of those global challenges, today's global challenges, some education, because people, I think, are inspired by people in space. But it's really the major impact of our Earth Science program that has the ability to address a global challenge in the future, and that's of climate change and pollution. So this is widely recognized by the military as a huge issue for them as well. If you look at what used to be the quadrangle reports, the House and the Senate intelligence reports all give significant focus to climate change. They know that flooding, drought, desertification, wildfires, thawing permafrost all impact their plans. The military does the best job of anyone with long-term plans in our government. And so they are looking at these things. These are installation impacts. Ports are not going to be able to be utilized in the future. They are also operational impacts. We know that the impacts from climate change have caused great instability. The war in Syria is most often cited as our first climate change war, but wars over resources are not new, and they are not ending. This is something that our community is and can do more to address. But what really gets climate change to the top of every list of grand challenges today is the global acceptance led by the United Nations several years ago and fed by information from our community that there are sustainable development goals built upon us doing better. Part of doing all these things like instantaneous communications is we can see what's happening as well. We can see the inequality. We can see that water resources are impossible to continue in some parts of the world. And we in aerospace can help contribute more to that. The Paris Climate Agreement, obviously the UN nations getting together to state these goals really should not be overlooked. When was the last time the UN got together to talk about going to space? Is this a global challenge? In the 1960s, we had the Law of Outer Space. We had the Space Act. We couldn't even get the Moon Treaty signed. We didn't sign it. I know it sounds hurtful, but I think we feel we're being unsuccessful because we're trying to do the wrong things. We came about to solve grand challenges. We are solutions-oriented people, engineers in particular, aerospace generally. I'm not going to spend much time trying to convince you this is happening or that this is being driven by emissions. I have a couple of charts. The panel after mine is focused on this topic, and for those of you who just really don't believe the data, you can ask me, but I'm breaking a rule I have to not speak about things in public that people in the audience know more about than you, and so this is that area. Coming into this field a year ago, recognizing that at NASA I was given these briefings as well, it really hits how the data correlates over time. These are global temperature trends just since 1880. You know we get this data from the ice cores. I did a wonderful trip to Antarctica when I was at NASA, and it could not be clearer that these variations are not explained by natural occurrences. You can look even that volcanic and solar storms are quite low compared to the impact of greenhouse gas emissions. I also like this chart because that low brown chart is aerosols. It shows we can do something about this. NASA, we say we discovered the ozone hole. Maybe we didn't. NSF, fine. We in the community discovered a problem with our atmosphere. We shared that problem with policymakers and worked with them to fix it, and we fixed it. We fixed it. Correlation beyond just the last 100 years, 1,200 years, again, through ice core, trees, data we have over time, correlates exactly with temperatures, with emissions, and with CO2 in the atmosphere. We are doing this to ourselves. And the reason that's important, I know we like to say, well, it doesn't matter, it's happening, let's do something about it. But if we recognize we're doing it ourselves and we can tell what it is we're doing, that's the way you can fix it. One more, atmospheric concentrations of CO2 along with emissions of CO2. There are smaller cycles within this grand trajectory. So is it a theory? You bet. So is gravity. It's not just the atmosphere, it is the ocean. Oceans absorb 90% of the heat. They are our canary in the coal mine, and they are dying. The acidification in the ocean is causing coral to die. We are losing populations of fish. Half of the population, several billion people, count on protein from the ocean for their diets. Methane, I'm going to talk a bit about because it is increasing at record rates since the industrial age, as seen by this chart. There is no question that is coming from us. Yes, it's natural, and we have made those natural processes increase. I take this very seriously. I know others do. But for me, if I look at in my lifetime alone, we will have seen the greatest temperature change than all of human history. It's something to contemplate. I know it's hard to make this personal. We have the girl in the well syndrome. We can all care about that little blonde girl who fell in the well for days. But billions of people not having access to fresh water and food is something that's more than we can imagine. But that's not who we are. In this community, we do the big stuff. We take on the big, important challenges. We have helped respond to the tripling of catastrophic weather events since 1980. Speaks for themselves. We've always had hurricanes. We've always had mudflies, storms. The intensity of these has tripled since the intense storms, the number of them has tripled since 1980. If we had not been in a position to monitor these over at least the last 40 years, many, many more people would have died. That is a contribution this community has made. It's widely recognized that aerospace can be and is a major contributor to solving this global challenge. The group on Earth observations that I know Danielle Wood talked about on Monday, they're the group of 20 nations from the UN that are really focused and have the ability, most of them, to build satellites. Why us? You talk to astronauts, there's probably a few in the audience, they all come back universally overwhelmed by the view of the Earth from space. Many of us are anxious to be able to go and see that for ourselves. When I was 22 and entered this community, one of the things that excited me was the ability to view the Earth from space and see not only that we are one planet and we need to work together more peacefully, but that we also have a very thin atmosphere. The perspective from space cannot be gotten from elsewhere. The scale of the data that we get from space cannot be received from just in situ measurements. It's scale, it's consistency, it's that we can compare data over time. We can cross borders where previously we couldn't have been able to see the Muslim concentration camps in China. We now see them being built. Imagine if we had had this capability during World War II. How would we have helped the world be better? We have to use the resources we have for good. It is our responsibility, in my view. The data can be used to verify what we already have measured, but you can't be everywhere. I was home in Michigan over the holidays, and my family is a farm, and they've got GPS on their tractors. They check the moisture of the soil. They plant genetically modified seeds that are based on information they know from space about drought and flooding. Don't even think about it. We do that. So we're good at this. We can and should do more. Being able to share data in an open way is something, a policy issue that we should be championing. I think it was also Danielle who spoke that our data is free and open, and that's certainly true for the US government. But in what format is it available? What can you really do with that data? Those are some of the things that we do at Earthrise, is try to put the data in a useful format so that people can solve problems utilizing the information they have from space. This is the second time you've seen this chart. If you came to Danielle Wood's talk, I wasn't here, but I watched it online, and she put this up, and I had the 17 Sustainable Development Goals as well from the United Nations. It is a wonderful thing that aerospace addresses more than half of those Sustainable Development Goals for the globe. I'll just give you two examples. First being zero hunger. GeoClam is a group of United Nations countries that are sharing information about agriculture production to help feed the world. It's been an interesting time over the last few decades and years as we can see more of what is happening and we see more famine. We see families walking 20 miles, mostly it's the women, to get water. Can't survive without water for 3 days. We are helping be able to track this with other nations, and we should be very proud of that. Marine life, as I mentioned, a huge food source for much of the population of the world. From space, tied with in situ buoys and so forth, we are able to not only measure what's happening with temperatures and acidification of the ocean, but target for illegal fishing and the ability to manage those resources, again, for the benefit of all. So I will put in 3 buckets where it is that we address climate catastrophe from space: predictions, mitigation, and adaptation. Adaptation, resilience, very similar. Prediction is something that we're all pretty comfortable with. We know NOAA has been tracking storms. We have better and better models and have saved millions of lives. We can do better. This is an area that NASA focuses on, but I know I'm very NASA-centric with my background. There are many other things that we know from other, certainly, military programs that can do more. We have data that, if it was combined, could lead to even better measurement tools and information systems. And this is an area that we are counted on for disaster response and for planning. If you look at hurricanes, devastating impacts as these storms reach catastrophic levels. Walaka in Hawaii this year. If you look at glacier melt, this is another way we can measure what's happening in our world, being able to model the sea rise. We know the sea is rising. As I said, I went to Antarctica as before we had Dr. Ellen Stofan as the chief scientist at NASA. We had Dr. Waleed Abdelati. He is known as the Iceman, and he's taught me about the importance of ice and glaciers on our planet. Here's a simple format. People always give me the simple format. This is great. Think about Greenland. Think about Antarctica. None of the other stuff really matters. In my lifetime, we've lost 10% of our glaciers. My lifetime. The impact of Greenland, which now has fissures, which is melting at accelerating rates, the impact of what we have discovered in Antarctica as ice shelves that could drop will be catastrophic. Great that we can measure whether that wall around Manhattan is going to need to be 3 or 5 meters high by 2060. But I like to talk about mitigation. What is it that we can do to stop it? And this is where we get into, in my view, the really exciting stuff from space. We can measure greenhouse gas emissions on Earth from space. We have been doing it. We need to do more. The more precision we get in this area, we are going to be able to help support policies that can support a carbon monetization scheme, a greenhouse gas monetization scheme, incentives to use less. This is something that has sort of been the holy grail. Other countries have tried it. We know it comes from self-reporting at this point, but think about our ability in space. As engineers, you develop sensors to go in space and be able to identify to enough of a precise measure that we can implement cap and trade policy. How will that incentivize renewables? It's just, it really is a game changer. It could be for us. We also, I think part of mitigation is helping people understand and see what is happening, because NASA, photos from space, NASA are some of the most recognized and trusted sources. We look at deforestation in the Amazon. We know what's happening, and when we put this information out in real time, again, this is something Earthrise does through our newswire, activists go and stop those that are working to kill the lungs that we have on our planet. From space, we can look at these oil wells being drilled in Texas just over the last 30 years. We call it natural gas, but drilling of natural gas puts methane into the atmosphere. We are now measuring from space one of the most damaging greenhouse gases that humans are releasing at unprecedented rates into the atmosphere, which is causing a lot of this heating. This is from Digital Globe, a Maxar company, and working privately. Companies that are drilling for natural gas don't like that methane leaks, so they will pay to see where those leaks are to fill them. It's a natural way to use our wonderful economic drivers to benefit all. As I mentioned, methane is particularly problematic. You probably heard it is 34 times more effective at warming than CO2. It is something that we are responsible for putting out in unprecedented rates. Certainly our production of beef and our eating of meat is part of this. That farm in Michigan, it's a beef cattle farm. Happy Christmas. Happy Christmas to all. They are a little tired of me talking about this, but they are the first ones to acknowledge that that family, our family, has had the farm for 175 years. How many businesses last 175 years? Things change. They'd be more than happy, as they have been, planting soybeans forever. They say, well, now you rich people in the city, I can pick it early, send it to the cities, and call it edamame, and charge 4 times as much. It's just soybeans. These are things people can change, and I think we're going to have to if we want to continue to habitate this planet. There are a number of assets already on orbit that are addressing methane. It's really an exciting thing. EU with Copernicus, GHG, which I just showed you from Digital Globe. MethaneSat was just announced last week. I had it on the chart already, but changed the launch from TBD to 2022. The Environmental Defense Fund is working with the private sector to launch these satellites because they don't want to wait for the government. They recognize there will be a market. When somebody realizes we can do this, government policies will follow. And some of these are very private because they think they can get, in fact, a competitive advantage over doing it first. In addition to methane, we have assets on orbit that measure carbon. OCO 2 and 3. Japan has GOSAT 1 and 2. Europe, as well as the private sector. We are planning for more. This isn't something, some new leap that we've never thought of. Our community is doing this. Probably many of you work in these areas. Ultimately, this is another video that you saw if you came to Danielle Wood's talk. This is a NASA product. NASA created it, all with real data, and it is about, it is showing you CO2 in the atmosphere over seasons. And it's classic, as we were loading the slides yesterday, gentleman behind the, working the AV said, oh, that's so beautiful, it'd be a great screensaver. And that is something that many of us have come to think. And again, the girl in the well syndrome. It's beautiful. We recognize we can also, so much data went in to make this model. But we at NASA are just charged now with showing it. This is what's happening. And my view is that would be like saying to NIH, show us cancer. And there's cancer. And every once in a while on those medical shows, oh, that's a beautiful tumor, and it creeps everyone out. Say that's all NIH did. They showed you cancer. That's what we're doing. We're showing you climate change. We're showing you devastation. We aren't allowed to do anything about it. Even when I was at NASA, this isn't a current administration thing. Well, we just measure. We don't do anything about it. Well, who the hell is going to do something about it if the very scientists who measure it don't? I would say off my soapbox, but that is not the case. The last of the 3 stages, prediction, mitigation, adaptation. This is where we do something about it. Awareness. Top of the circle, we know NASA does that. We know the aerospace does that. Private sector, military has driven many of these technologies, by the way. It's the assessment piece that is missing. Every once in a while, we'll pay for some university researchers to help, but it doesn't feed back into a major system which then assists with planning at the local level, because these impacts at the local level are varied. There is not a one-size-fits-all to how to react to what is happening on the planet. We then have to go and produce, build the systems to address what's happening and then monitor and evaluate, which we also have the ability to do. Won't spend too much time on these. We know the perspective of space is unique. Iowa, this year. Flooding. Drought. Australia. This is over 18 years, and what's happening now? It's on fire. Wetlands. In my lifetime, we have lost 30% of our wetlands. Wetlands are what protect us from the devastation from hurricanes and major storms. And then there's the fires. We know that the significance of the fires is not only for those on the ground, but what it does over time to the atmosphere. I've talked mostly about this as a public good. Let me skip quickly to the economic imperatives and the benefits that come from the private sector's investment in these. Again, green aviation. We've partnered with industry and academia to make electric commercial aviation possible. We're doing more. I think this is an area that this conference has been discussing. And again, with my great appreciation for the invaluable work of our aviation industry, we can do more, and we will, because otherwise people will stop flying. And that's a challenge that our capitalist society can address. I mentioned reinsurance industry. Really, so much of the corporate world, I've been on a corporate board, is about managing risk. And climate change is going to and already impacting us all. It isn't just, oh, I'm not going to use my plastic bottle, although I really appreciate that, AIAA. People are looking to companies to invest in that have a longer-term ability to succeed. Those are not carbon-based, greenhouse gas emitting companies. So people will do more as companies And we in the policy world, in my view, just need to incentivize them to do so. All of this is coming at a time when we are ready as the aerospace community. When I started Earthrise, I got to name it. And of course, Earthrise came to mind because it's connecting space to the Earth. And it's the first time we as human beings got to look back and see ourselves in the mirror. And it is still the most famous photograph ever taken. And it started the environmental movement. No surprise, that was December of '68. A year and a couple months later, Earth Day started. We are in a renaissance of being able to sense the environment. So I named Earthrise and initially had capitalized the R-I-S-E, a renaissance in sensing the environment. I lost the debate with the designers to keep that capitalized, but the renaissance is allowing us to come at this unique time and assist in addressing this global challenge. We should all be very proud of what is happening because we are able to reduce the cost of access to space. During the early parts of my career in the 80s and 90s, this was the holy grail, couldn't be done. We went from $55,000 a kilogram to less than $5,000 now. We have, as part of this, reduced the size of satellites tremendously. We have increased their sensor capability. This is all things that engineers, scientists, aerospace and beyond have done to come together with the community that models the data, more data than gathered in the last 30 years than in all of human history before. We have more computing power than ever before, developments beyond aerospace that have helped with this renaissance, and the ability to now store data and have people be able to access it allows us to learn from this vast data that we have collected over 50 years. So this is a positive message. If we were not in a renaissance, we would have to start from zero. Robert Lightfoot talked about how the next thing will build on other things. Totally agree. We are building on these advances to address our future and the largest global challenge we have. Just a quick example of that is satellite launches. This is the number of global satellite launches since Sputnik. We have launched in the last 3 years more satellites than we launched in the whole history before that. A lot of them are smaller. A lot of these are doves. We in the US aren't the only ones. We are leaders, especially in the commercial arena. We have incentivized people to create businesses through satellites. We have 31 existing Earth science satellites. China beats us a little bit with 33. Not exactly sure those are all Earth science satellites. But as you can see, we do primarily 3 things. The science, the continuity mission. For us, this is Landsat. It's Sentinel for Europe. Meteorology through NOAA in the US is something everybody recognizes, and the private sector is driving innovation. So what do? We need a plan. I have a plan, as they say, and I believe that we as a community can do more of what we're doing to determine the data science needs, both the spectrum, the resolution, to support the 3 areas: prediction, mitigation, and adaptation. We want more time to advance warnings to help society. We want to be able to inform new policies to manage carbon in a way that it is reduced and naturally we are able to get off carbon and again keep our planet and its life and biodiversity as we found it, and to support commercial markets. We also need to adapt and inform infrastructure planning, health requirements, and unfortunately populations are already having to be displaced. In the US, we spend about $50 billion in our government space programs, just under half at NASA. Other agencies, civil, NOAA, a little bit in interior, the military, you have the intelligence side as well as the different space forces. Maybe they'll all be in one, but for now, NASA is, in my view, the best suited to lead this effort. We all know leadership matters. One of the reasons we aren't using all these assets is because there's a lack of leadership and coordination. So I believe that this is a challenge that NASA could step up to. We spend $2 billion of our $21 billion on it, and we wouldn't need all the money in NASA to change, but we would have to reprioritize. I argue we have the mandate within the Space Act of 1958. This is directly from the NASA Authorization Act to expand human knowledge of the Earth and phenomena in the atmosphere, to develop and carry out a comprehensive program of research, technology, and monitoring to understand and maintain the integrity of the Earth's atmosphere. We don't have to just show you a pretty picture. We are there to also help maintain the integrity of the Earth's atmosphere. Pretty clear. We are a solution-oriented agency, right? We don't give up. When I was at NASA, we did a big strategic meeting with the leaders at one point, and we had a facilitator, and she talked about what is NASA's best day. And we all said it privately, and when it came out, it wasn't Apollo 11, it wasn't Neil Armstrong, it was Apollo 13. Our best day was overcoming that challenge. That is how all the leaders felt, many of whom were astronauts. I have been lucky enough to meet and know many astronauts, included in them the Apollo 11 astronauts. I think at the 25th or something anniversary, I was interviewed with them, and Neil and Buzz got asked, well, what is it you would have done if, say, the lunar module couldn't have gotten off the moon? Did you have any plans to see how long you could walk from the module, leave some message for others to find? You're engineers, many of you. So Neil says, no, I'm pretty sure we would have worked every last minute to try to fix that. We are a solution-oriented community. But here's another reason we should do this. We, in the government programs, are funded by the public, and this is what the public thinks we should be doing. This is a poll from the summer of 2018 asking Americans top priorities that they think NASA should have. Number one, monitor key parts of Earth's climate system. Number two, monitor asteroids and objects that could hit Earth. Makes sense, right? These are things about them. Bottom of the list, send astronauts to the moon. 13% think that should be our priority. Send astronauts to Mars 18. This is my most controversial slide. I get it. We have our priorities flipped, in my view. We spend less than 10% of the NASA budget on the top two, and more than 60% on the bottom two. If words don't convince you, what about some pictures? This is what's happening in the world. I know it's easy to think we're here in this air-conditioned Orlando, we're going to be fine. But if your children didn't have the resources to live, would you go quietly into the night? I know I wouldn't. I was just reading more about pandemics. We are certain, as we limit our biodiversity, to be experiencing more pandemics. So ultimately, I want to quickly leave time for questions. The plan that I would put in place includes very simple things. Fulfilling the decadal surveys. When the Earth Science Decadal came out in 2008, it would have taken 30 years within our budget to get it done. Same thing with 2018. Fund those plans. We know what needs to be done. Don't shut off missions that exist, and incentivize government to not only measure but assess what is happening with climate change so we can do something about it. I think we should establish a US lead. If it's not NASA, create an agency. I think NASA has the best brand in the world. We're the best, most likely to be able to do this and be able to work with the private sector and the world to get it done. One of my concepts is a climate corps, again, with a NASA moniker, something like a Peace Corps. You are trained to read the data we get from space about a particular location. You go to that location, that part of the world that is having severe impacts, and train their local decision makers about how to utilize that data for their own and give them the ability to utilize these amazing tools that our community has developed. And finally, to be able to inform policies so that we can reduce our use of methane. So why us? That's what the talk's been about. We have the capability. We have the responsibility. Maybe not aerospace engineers, but as engineers, we have created the industrial age. We figured out ways to get fossil fuels out of the ground for all the right reasons. But in doing so, we have left the world in a crisis. We need to step up to manage that crisis. If we don't do that over the next 10 years, hopefully the next panel will talk about the tipping point, we won't have the chance. So when I was leading transition under Obama, one of the meetings, Jim Hansen, the chief scientist at the Goddard Space Institute, came to see me and implored me to do more. He gave me basically this talk, and he said to me, when generations after us are suffering, they won't blame those who didn't believe in climate change. They'll believe those of us who knew and didn't do anything about it, who had the tools and didn't do anything about it. So I don't know, I've always loved to say, I worked at NASA, I work at NASA. Those of you who do, it's a wonderful thing. And I always hear people even brag about their grandpa who worked at NASA and helped us go to the moon. Just imagine what it'd feel like if your grandchildren can tell their colleagues as they grow up, my dad, my mom, helped solve the dangerous effects of emitting so much greenhouse gases in the atmosphere that we were choking our planet. Imagine how you feel. If we have contributed to that, we step up to this challenge. And I will close with, I know I want to be like Neil Armstrong and spend every last breath I have trying to fix it, and I hope you will join me. Thank you.
So Lori, thank you. Your talk spurred a lot of questions.
Good.
So I'll just say up front, we're going to ask a few here, and then we'll immediately go to the hub in the expo hall, and we'll have time to have a much more extended Q&A. Let's see, so I have a few tagged here just to start us off with. And I really appreciate the engagement from the audience. Let's see, I think it's best to start with this question. What do you think we can do as a community to better communicate the ways that engineers and their work can improve the world?
That's a great question. We talk about communication a lot, and my view is it's not just communication. It's doing things that matter, and then it's easier to communicate about them. It was easy to communicate about Apollo. We were solving a grand challenge. If we were solving a grand challenge, communications would not be the problem. The problem is that we are doing something that we're having a hard time explaining, why we're taking billions of dollars to do it. We've tried to redo the same things over the last 45 years, and we haven't done it. So I don't believe it is just a communications problem.
Okay, thank you. Okay, here's another. What can we do to better leverage our remote sensing platforms to provide unbiased climate facts to non-technical audiences?
Yeah, that is a goal of Earthrise Alliance. We do this across the board. It's something that I think the government and NASA in particular should play a lead role in, a coordinating role. I think AIAA could play a role. You do standards. There should be standards for this data, and they should be widely recognized across industry, the government, and international. I think if I were leading a business, this is something that would help more than about anything. We need to utilize the data we have. We still need to drive doing more in sensor technology, but the data exists, and addressing standards and dissemination is key.
A somewhat related question, what technologies, for example, carbon capture, should we be investing in? Should we be more activists or technologists?
So I didn't talk much about big engineering things we could do, like carbon capture. Pete Warden talked about putting up a shield to block the sun. You know, we might get there. We might be in such dire straits that we try those things. I think we are in different fields within engineering and science, and you should focus on those skills you have, bringing them to bear to the problem. Some of those are going to be technological. Some, as I said, are data gathering, sharing, analytical. I think we are a large enough community that there's enough to do. And again, we require leadership and coordination, and I think that's what's missing.
Very good. China and India emissions are far greater than US emissions. How do we get them to share our values?
So glad I got that. One of my great Republican friends, when I announced what I was doing, wrote, well, I hope you're going to be I guess you'll be overseas a lot because China and India emit more than us. You bet, you bet. So first of all, per capita, we're still much higher, unfortunately. We still emit more per capita than any population similar to our size. There's a handful of countries like Bahrain, higher per capita, but we're the only ones of scale. And by the way, since when do we not want to be leaders in doing it better? Come on, leadership. We can drive these technologies. The US aerospace industry is by far more advanced than anyone, including China. If we sell this, they will want to be there too. We will have the technologies, and our companies will make the money selling that to them.
Very good. I think we have time for one more, hopefully quick question. So what in the education of an engineer prepares him or her to understand either one, societal problems, or two, the societal implications of their projects? Are you advocating a revolution in engineering education?
You know, I'm not an engineer. I hope I pointed that out, or maybe it was obvious. Aptitude tests always, when I was a kid, said I should be an engineer. I took all the math before my senior year. Story I've often told, but Ellen addressed this quite well yesterday, so I didn't get into it, was that my senior year of high school, I came back to school, and the 5 other people who had also had all the math had been signed up to take calculus at the local college, but not me. They were all boys. I remember my mom being incensed. She was a homemaker who I'd never really seen upset. They said, well, we didn't think she would want to. She's a girl, why would she do that? I remember being secretly happy because those were 5 very geeky boys. However, it made a big difference. I became political science and economics major, and so I'm not one to opine on how we teach engineering. To me, part of the thing that we need is a more diverse engineering pool, as is obviously shown by the audiences at these meetings. And I believe if we did a better job addressing global challenges and communicating about them, we would be able to recruit a more broad employee, a more diverse employee base. And that in itself has you look at things in a different way. Women in general enter fields where they want to make a difference for humanity. You look at nursing and teaching, the early ones, but now medical schools, more than half are women. We have not used engineering, and certainly aerospace engineering, to address grand challenges, those really tough things. And I think that is not an education issue, that is a policy issue. And I'm not an engineer. Honestly, a bunch of engineers making policy hasn't worked so well either.
Thank you. I think we're at the end of our time here today, but thank you, Lori, for sharing your perspectives.
And thank you, AIAA, for having me. It really was great. I know that I thought I might get questions, some controversial things online about programs I didn't get asked about. I love this community. I think aerospace is going to solve the world's problems, and I look forward to helping you do it.
Very good. Hey, so before everybody gets up and leaves, just a couple of reminders. Again, we're going to the hub right after this for an extended Q&A. And following that, there's Forum 360 and Regency Q, where this conversation will again be continued and hosted by John Tilko. And then one more note for the day, this evening at 5 p.m., we will have our, what is it called? I'm on this panel. Yeah, Women at SciTech panel. And the format is changed to a panel, and we really think it'll be fun, and I look forward to seeing a lot of folks there. And I don't have the location for that, but I believe there was a nice email that went out to all of you today on that topic. So hope to see you there. Thanks.
Thanks.